Well, that don't look right. I'm a fan of Pokemon so far as I occasionally have the show running in the background while working. It's interesting enough to give my brain something to focus on other than the work I should be doing, but tedious enough to not arrest my attention completely. I like Pokemon as a concept. The idea of a kid traveling the world unsupervised while befriending magical animals only to have them fight each other is amazing. It touches on everything young boys like, and big boys think back to when the oppressive veil of adulthood and wisdom shrouds the everyday. I make an effort to watch the movies when the release dates co-align with the episodes of the show, and recently I reached Kyurem and the Sword of Justice. God, was it terrible. But I think my biggest complaint lie in the design of Keldeo. And yes, I know Keldeo appeared in the games before the movie, but I don't play the games, so this is how I discovered him. Pokemon aren't the most believable creatures in general. I think somewhere around generation 2 or 3, the people who designed them gave up on making them look like functional animals and focused on making them look interesting. Which I don't oppose as a thing, but there is a reason only the Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon appeared in the Detective Pikachu movie. The later generations are too imaginative and fantastic to look like living beings. Which leads me back to Keldeo. His design isn't all that outlandish. I can see he's inspired by horses, but the simple way he's drawn and overall outline reminds me a lot of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. It's jarring how much it feels like he belongs in that show and has no business being in the Pokemon franchise. So I thought, why not spend some time and see if I can do better? Well, ever heard of racing drivers' excuses? You're about to hear some artists' excuses. I'm still figuring out how to navigate Clip Studio Paint, and the shortcuts and techniques that I learned in Photoshop don't always apply there. Further on, I thought I could first sketch and then outline the thing before using a more painterly technique where I build up the drawing in layers in an attempt to make it look really realistic. I gave up on that when I figured out I had no idea what I was doing and it had been 5 days already. And I decided to just go for this with no studies or preparation whatsoever. I just sat down and started doodling. Having said all of this, let me explain what I was going for. First things first, I loved the horns. If I was going to get anything right about this, it was the horns. And it's not entirely clear to me if the blue combs on either side of Keldeo's mane are supposed to be hair or bone, but to me they brought to mind antlers holding up a long mane like a hairdo. I think that looked really cool, but I'm so unimaginative I couldn't convince myself an animal could have blue antlers, so they became the same color as his horn. Since it reminded me of a hat, I decided to join the antlers and horns into one solid structure, like a crown atop his head. It makes him look more dignified, I think, and a bit more dangerous, which is always fun. After this, I began constructing the head. It was a bit tricky because even though he reminded me of a My Little Pony, he doesn't look anything like a real pony. His head is round, he has no ears, and his nose is just a blunt shape. Since the crown reminded me of an elk's, but his overall physique is much too lean, I decided to make him a deer. The snout is inspired by horses with their thick lips and blunt shape, partly to reference the equine inspiration of the original design, partly because I felt a true deer snout would be too angular to remind of Keldeo. The ears at first I couldn't decide on. He needed them, but the design clearly doesn't have any. At first I tried making them without an oris, so they'd just be 2 small holes covered with a mini lobe. This didn't look right at all to me, so on a different layer I also drew something similar to cow's ears at the side of his head, and saved them away for later. I ended up using them because it just looked better to me. Finally was the matter of his mane. In the anime it flows behind him like a flag or a hairdo, but animals don't really have more hair on their heads than they do the rest of their body. What I imagined was the mane did grow down his neck similar to a horse, but it was caught up and collected in his antlers like a huge bowl, giving the impression of a hairdo. I liked the idea, but the execution not so much. It just looks like hair to me, so I should have probably found some references for bunched up hair and made it look better. And I am not going to talk about the eyes, because I can't draw eyes whatsoever, I am aware of that, let's finish this quickly. Overall, I think it turned out pretty well. I really wish I had added in some fur. It would have added depth and form to it, and made it look as realistic as I originally intended, but I couldn't find any brushes in CSP that would have let me do that quickly, so I would have had to draw every individual hair, same as I did with the hairdo. That was too much work for me, but aside from that, I think it turned out pretty well. Leave a like if you liked it, a comment if you feel like, and subscribe for more comedy as you watch me flounder around here. This has been a new doodle, thank you all, and have a good one.